I stood at the entrance of the restaurant, my fingers tightening around the smooth leather of my clutch. The golden glow of chandeliers spilled across polished marble, casting a warm, expensive light over the room. Through the glass, I could see them, my family clustered around the best table, laughter rising above the gentle clink of wine glasses. For a moment, I hesitated, watching them from the threshold, feeling like an outsider peering into a world I was supposed to belong. Tadat the Mater D greeted me with a practiced smile. "Your name, miss?" Before I could answer, my mother's voice cut through the hum of conversation. "Oh, there she is, finally." Heads turned. I felt the weight of strangers' eyes as I stepped forward, the click of my heels echoing in. The hush. My dress was simple, black, perfectly tailored, the kind that whispers success rather than shouts it. I'd chosen it carefully, hoping it would give me armor for the night ahead. They'd positioned themselves at the restaurant's finest table, the one with the sweeping view of the city skyline. My mother, Helen, sat at the head, her ruby pendant, catching the light, a gift from my father before cancer took him. Next to her was my cousin Lucas, sprawled comfortably, his arm draped over the back of his chair, a glass of something amber and expensive in his hand. His wife Brittany sat beside him, her diamond bracelet flashing as she scrolled through her phone. I approached, noticing immediately what they'd chosen not to see. There was no chair for me. Lucas's smirk arrived before his words did. "This table is for family," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Go find a spot outside." The couple at the next table paused, their discomfort obvious. Brittany chimed in, her voice sweet but sharp. "Lucas is just joking." But he wasn't, and we all knew it. I said nothing, my face a mask, as I dragged a chair from a nearby table. The legs scraped loudly against the floor, a harsh note against the soft piano music. My mother didn't meet my eyes. She fiddled with her napkin, smoothing invisible wrinkles. "You're late," she said finally, as if my arrival 15 minutes early had somehow disrupted their carefully constructed narrative. "Traffic," I lied, not mentioning the 20 minutes I'd spent in my car, debating whether to come in at all. As I sat, I watched them clink glasses, their conversation bouncing from exclusive vacations to luxury purchases. Lucas's new Rolex glinted in the light. Brittany's designer purse sat on its own chair, logo facing outward. Their words tumbled over each other, frantic, as if they were performing for an audience that might stop watching at any moment. I didn't participate. I watched, hands wrapped around my water glass, observing the theater playing out before me. A memory surfaced, sharp and uninvited. My childhood bedroom, stripped bare, boxes stacked by the door. My father leaning against the frame, not angry, worse, dismissive. "This business idea of yours is just another phase," he'd said. "You'll be back when reality sets in." I'd moved out that day, into an apartment so small the kitchen table doubled as my first office. I worked 18-hour days, ate ramen, and built my company one client at a time. That first Christmas, I'd called home only to hear laughter in the background as my mother explained they were having a small gathering, one I wasn't invited to. When I landed my first six-figure contract, I'd wanted to call them. Instead, I'd opened a bottle of champagne with my 2 employees and toasted to those who believe in themselves when no one else will. Rachel, earth to Rachel. Lucas snapped his fingers in front of my face. I blinked, straightening in my chair. "Yes." "We've been talking about St. Bart's," Brittany said, twisting her bracelet. "Lucas and I went in January. Rothschilds were actually staying at our resort." I took a sip of water, letting their words wash over me. 3 days ago, my mother's desperate phone call had broken our usual pattern of polite monthly check-ins. "It's been so long, sweetie. Everyone misses you." Her voice had carried that particular tone, the one that speaks more in its silence. than its words, but loneliness is a powerful motivator, and some part of me still longed for a place at the family table. Now I saw Lucas's Rolex, Brittany's purse, the way their conversation danced around money. The waiter arrived with coffee, and I wrapped my hands around the mug, watching the play unfold. You know what? I'm splurging tonight, Lucas announced, tapping the menu. The Wagyu ribeye, and let's do the 2015 Bordeaux. Brittany nodded. Lobster for me, and maybe we should start with champagne? It's a special occasion. One by one, they ordered the most expensive items, exchanging glances when they thought I wasn't looking. My mother fidgeted, complicit but uncomfortable. I hid a small smile behind my cup as understanding dawned. Now I knew exactly why I was here. 2 hours. 2 hours of conversation that flowed around me like water around a stone. Every time I tried to speak, Lucas's voice rose, drowning out my words. Nobody cares about work talk at dinner, he interrupted when I mentioned my company's expansion. We're here to catch up on family stuff, as if I wasn't family, as if my life's work was less significant than his real estate stories. I took a measured sip, mentally documenting each slight. The waiter refilled my glass 4 times. I barely touched my food. I watched, listened, learned. You look good for someone who works all the time, Brittany offered, her eyes scanning my face for signs of fatigue. Do you ever actually leave that office? Before I could answer, she launched into a story about her spa weekend, the words rejuvenation and self-care falling from her lips with practiced ease. My mother reached across the table, her fingers brushing my wrist. Let's all just enjoy being together, she said, her smile strained. It's been too long. Whose fault is that? I almost asked, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded and cut a small piece of my untouched salmon. Double quotes. Oh, Lucas, tell Rachel about that new place we tried last month, my mother said suddenly, her voice a little too bright. The Italian one with the chandeliers made from Venetian glass. I set my fork down carefully. Last month? I asked, the realization settling like ice in my stomach. An awkward silence descended, brief but heavy. We try to do this monthly, Brittany explained, examining her manicure. Family dinner, it's tradition. A tradition I was just now hearing about? I see, I said, my voice even. Lucas cleared his throat. Well, you're always so busy running your little company and all. The diminutive stung exactly as intended. I straightened in my chair, not too busy for family if invited. My mother's eyes darted nervously between us. More wine, anyone? Lucas seized the opportunity to shift topics. Speaking of business, he leaned forward, his Rolex catching the light. The market's been brutal lately. 3 deals fell through last week. He looked pointedly at me. Not everyone can be swimming in success. I recognized the play immediately, the suggestion of struggle, the implication of need. That Mercedes you were looking at might need to wait, Brittany said, placing a comforting hand on his arm. Such a difficult time to be making big purchases. She turned to me. I've been trying to find something to replace my Audi, but everything is just so expensive these days, even the base models. My mother nodded sympathetically before adding, Rachel has been so blessed financially with her business taking off like it has. There it was. The setup crystallized before me, elegant in its simplicity, the expensive restaurant, the lavish orders. The stories of financial hardship followed by pointed references to my success. They hadn't invited me to dinner. They'd invited my wallet. The waiter approached with practiced timing, a leather-bound check folder nestled in his hands. Lucas caught his eye and nodded slightly. The folder landed directly in front of me with a soft thud. I didn't immediately reach for it. The silence stretched, heavy with expectation. Lucas finally said, leaning back with a triumphant smile. Thanks for dinner, Rachel. You don't mind, right? We figured since you're doing so well. All eyes turned to me. My mother's fingers nervously twisted her napkin. Brittany's smile was brittle at the edges. Lucas radiated entitled confidence. My phone buzzed in my purse. I retrieved it, glancing at the screen. Meeting confirmed for 9 p.m. We've locked in the Singapore contract. Celebrating at the office whenever you can make it, Diane. A picture formed in my mind my business partner, Diane, who stayed until 3 a.m. helping me finish our first major proposal. Miguel from development, who brought me soup when I worked through a fever to meet a deadline. Sarah from legal, who believed in our vision enough to leave her corner office at a prestigious firm. People who saw my potential, celebrated my victories, supported me through setbacks. My chosen family, the contrast was stark and clarifying. Blood ties do not automatically confer loyalty, respect, or love. Those qualities must be earned, cultivated through consistent action and mutual regard. I picked up the check slowly, examining it with careful attention. The table collectively exhaled, relief rippling across their features. My mother's shoulders relaxed. Lucas's smirk deepened. Brittany adjusted her designer purse, already moving on to her next thought. I set the bill down directly in front of Lucas. My voice, when it came, was quiet but firm. I'm not your personal ATM. The silence that followed was absolute. Lucas's face flushed red. Brittany's mouth opened slightly, no words emerging. My mother was the first to recover. Rachel, honey, she said, her voice taking on the placating tone she used when I was a child having a difficult moment. You can help them out a little, can't you? We're family. Family, the word, hung between us, its meaning twisted beyond recognition. In their definition, family meant I give and they take. My success became communal property, while my struggles remained solitary burdens. I met my mother's eyes directly. Yes, we are family, which is why I deserve the same respect you'd give to anyone else at this table. The trembling began. In Lucas's hands first, a slight vibration that traveled up his arms as the reality of my refusal set in. $2,000 of carefully cultivated entitlement crashing against the seawall of my quiet dignity. I stood, gathering my purse. Not in anger or haste, but with the deliberate movements of a woman reclaiming her worth, one boundary at a time. Have you ever had to stand your ground against family members who tried to take advantage of your success? I wanted to ask the room, but instead, I let the question hang in the air, unspoken. The bill sat between us, leather-bound and imposing. $2,200 for a single dinner. Lucas stared at me, his face gradually shifting from smugness to disbelief as I made no move toward my purse. The flush began at his collar and climbed upward, angry crimson. You can't be serious, he said, his voice rising, drawing glances from neighboring tables. You make more than all of us combined. I took another sip of my coffee, savoring its bitter warmth. That's irrelevant to who ordered what. Brittany leaned forward, the sweetness in her voice curdling. We wouldn't have ordered all this if we knew you'd be so petty about it. Her designer bracelet caught the light as she gestured toward the untouched dessert plates, the half-empty wine bottles. My mother touched my arm, her fingers trembling slightly. Maybe we can split it somehow. You take half and we'll manage the rest. The restaurant manager approached, his practiced smile tightening at the corners. Is everything all right? Here, he asked, his gaze flicking between our tense faces and the untouched bill. Professional concern barely masked discomfort. Beneath my calm exterior, emotions crashed against each other like storm waves, anger, disappointment, a strange, unexpected grief for what this family could have been. Lucas's bravado faltered as the manager lingered, his presence's silent demand for resolution. We've been planning this dinner for weeks, Lucas finally admitted, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You never return Mom's calls. You're too busy for family gatherings. What were we supposed to do? Ask, I said simply. Not manipulate. Brittany's perfect mask slipped further. You never come to family things anyway, unless there's something in it for you. The accusation hung in the air, heavy with irony she didn't recognize. When have I ever been genuinely invited? I countered quietly. The last 3 Christmases. Dad's memorial service anniversary, your housewarming. I was there alone, while everyone else brought partners I barely acknowledged. My mother dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. We just thought you wouldn't mind helping out the family, she whispered, tears welling. Things have been difficult. I didn't know how else to ask you. Difficult how? I pressed, already suspecting the answer. Lucas and Brittany exchanged glances. I lost my job 3 months ago. Lucas stared at his plate, the admission clearly costing him. The real estate market tanked and our firm downsized. He's been looking everywhere, Brittany added quickly, but we have appearances to maintain. You understand that? I thought about the Rolex on his wrist, the European vacation photos Brittany posted last month, the designer purse preening. On its own chair, our credit cards are maxed out, Brittany confessed, her voice barely audible. All of them. The picture clarified, maintaining the illusion of success while drowning in debt. And I was the designated life raft. A memory flickered my 8th grade science fair. Winning first place with a solar energy project I built myself. My parents didn't attend. They were celebrating Lucas passing algebra with the minimum grade required. My high school graduation, where my valedictorian speech received polite applause from my family, followed by excessive fawning over my cousin's acceptance to a state college with a C average. Working 2 jobs to put myself through college. While they posted family vacation photos from Kinkin. Sorry you couldn't join us, Rachel, but we know how dedicated you are to your studies. The Christmas after I started my business, when Lucas loudly proclaimed to the extended family, Rachel's playing entrepreneur now. Let's see how long until she comes back to the real world. Holiday gatherings where I arrived alone because work consumed my life, while they brought significant others who were welcomed immediately. Family dinners where my growing business successes were deliberately ignored, changed to other topics with practiced smoothness. Remember Thanksgiving? 2 years ago? I asked quietly. Lucas looked confused by this apparent non sequitur. I had just landed the Westfield account. It doubled my company's revenue overnight. When I mentioned it, you said, and I quote, "Nobody wants to hear about your little company at dinner, Rachel. That was just a joke," he muttered, but his eyes slid away from mine. And Mom's 4th of July barbecue last summer? When I mentioned we'd expanded to a new office downtown, you told everyone I was trying to sound important and changed the subject to Brittany's new car. Mother shifted uncomfortably, never having defended me against these slights. And now my little company makes me worth asking for money. I tapped the bill with one finger. Interesting timing. The manager returned, his professional demeanor intact but purpose clear. I apologize for the interruption, but we have other guests waiting. We'll need to resolve the bill soon. His polite words carried firm urgency. Lucas's frustration boiled over. Fine, you've made your point, just pay half. Brittany frantically tapped at her phone, evidently messaging friends for emergency loans. From her increasingly panicked expression, the responses weren't favorable. Nobody's answering, she hissed at Lucas. Lucas pulled out his wallet, flipping through it with growing desperation. A membership card, a driver's license, a single $20 bill. Mother opened her purse, hands trembling as she searched for a credit card they all knew was already maxed out. The manager shifted his weight from one foot to another. We'll need to resolve this bill now, please. My mother pulled out a checkbook so rarely used the cover was still pristine. "Rachel, please," she whispered, "just this once." I thought about all the just this once moments that would inevitably follow. The gradual erosion of boundaries, the entitled expectations that would grow with each concession. "You ordered it, you pay for it," I said, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "I'm only responsible for my coffee." I placed a $10 bill on the table. $4 for my coffee, 6 for the server who had to witness this family drama. Lucas gripped the edge of the table. "You'd really let your own mother be humiliated in public?" "No," I answered, the word sharper than I intended. "But I'd let adults face the consequences of their choices." "What price would you put on self-respect?" As I looked at the $2,200 bill and the family who plotted for weeks to manipulate me into paying it, I realized I already knew my answer. "You'll regret embarrassing us like this," Lucas hissed, leaning across the table until I could smell the expensive bourbon on his breath. His voice was low enough that nearby diners wouldn't hear the words, but loud enough to ensure everyone at our table did. The veneer of family warmth had vanished like morning dew under a harsh sun. Brittany's eyes welled with tears, perfectly timed. 2 drops slid down her cheeks, leading trails through her foundation, but somehow not disturbing her mascara. "I can't believe you do this to your own family," she said, her voice catching on the word family with practiced precision. "After everything we've done for you," my mother murmured, her fingers twisting the ruby pendant at her throat. The phrase hung in the air, a question without a question mark. I searched my memory for what, exactly, they'd done for me beyond. Offering conditional love with strings attached. The unified front they presented just minutes earlier. Their smug certainty that I would cover this extravagant bill began to crack like thin ice under too much weight. Lucas pulled out his wallet and slapped down a credit card with theatrical confidence. The manager ran it through the machine, then returned with a tight smile. "I'm sorry, sir. This card has been declined." Lucas's face flushed. He produced another card, then another. Each time, the manager returned with the same apologetic expression. Brittany dug through her designer purse, her fingers trembling slightly as she handed over her own card. "I'm sorry, ma'am." I watched this performance unfold, my coffee now cold between my palms. The weight of their expectations, this trap they'd laid, sat heavily across my shoulders, but as they scrambled to solve a problem entirely of their own making, something shifted inside me. I placed a $5 bill on the table beside my untouched coffee cup. "For my coffee," I said, adding another 20, "and a tip for our server." 3 pairs of eyes swung toward me, each revealing a different flavor of desperation. Lucas opened his mouth, but I met his gaze with such steady calm that his words died before reaching his lips. "I'm just letting everyone take responsibility for their own choices," I said, looking at each family member in turn, my voice neither angry nor satisfied, simply resolved. "We all make decisions. We all live with the consequences." I gathered my purse and stood. My shoulders, which had been tight with tension since I first walked into Belmont's, suddenly relaxed. I felt taller, straighter, as if I'd put down a burden I'd been carrying for years. The manager cleared his throat. "Perhaps there's someone else you could call for assistance with the bill?" Lucas's nostrils flared as he pulled out his phone. He stepped away from the table, his back rigid as he made a call that clearly pained him more than any physical injury could. "Brittany's." Fingers flew to her wrist, unclasping her tennis bracelet with frantic movements. She began removing earrings next, piling the jewelry in front of her as if preparing for a pawn shop visit. "Rachel." My mother rose, following me as I stepped away from the table. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Please reconsider. Just this once, we can work something out later." I turned to face her. For the first time tonight, her expression contained genuine emotion rather than social performance. Fear lurked in the lines around her eyes, not just fear of the bill, but fear of losing me. This isn't about money, I said gently but firmly. It's about respect. I won't be used, not even by family, especially not by family. She flinched as if I'd slapped her, but the words needed to be said. I caught my reflection in the restaurant's ornate mirror as I turned. The woman looking back at me stood straight, her eyes clear and certain. For the first time all evening, perhaps for the first time in years, I recognized myself completely. Tomorrow, I would sit with my team people who valued my ideas, who collaborated rather than manipulated, people who'd earned my trust through consistent respect rather than assumed it through genetic connection. As I reached the door, my mother's hand caught my elbow. "Please don't leave like this," she said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Her eyes, so like mine in color but not in conviction, searched my face for mercy. I covered her hand with mine, feeling the paper-thin skin that spoke of her advancing years. "This pattern needs to end," I told her, my voice softening. "I'm willing to talk just you and me when you're ready. But there need to be new rules. Respect, honesty, and no financial exploitation." She swallowed hard, nodding slightly. "Call me when you're ready," I added, squeezing her hand once before letting go. I pushed through the heavy glass door of Belmont's and stepped into the cool night air. Behind me, the family drama continued to unfold, but ahead of me stretched an evening suddenly free of obligation, a future reclaimed one boundary at a time. The door remained open behind me, both literally and figuratively, but only those willing to meet me on equal ground would find welcome on the other side. Thought my heels clicked against the asphalt as I strode toward my car. The night air felt clean. After the suffocating atmosphere inside, I heard the restaurant door slam open behind me. "Rachel." Lucas's voice bounced off the parked cars. I kept walking, my key fob in my hand, freedom just 20 steps away. "Don't you dare walk away." His footsteps quickened, gaining on me. "You're not part of this family anymore." The words were meant to wound, to stop me in my tracks. 5 years ago, they might have. I slowed my pace but didn't turn. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." I pivoted, shoulders square. Lucas's face was mottled red beneath the parking lot's fluorescent glow. Behind him, Brittany hurried to catch up, her designer heels clicking aggressively on the pavement. Several diners lingered near the restaurant entrance, openly watching the unfolding drama. "You ungrateful little—" Lucas cut himself off, breathing hard. "Who do you think you are?" "I think I'm someone who just wanted a normal family dinner." My voice remained level, a stark contrast to his escalating volume. Brittany reached us, slightly breathless. "This isn't about dinner, and you know it." Mother appeared in the restaurant doorway. Hesitating Dot, I saw the indecision in her posture caught between her niece and nephew and her only daughter. Lucas ran his hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of my father that it momentarily disarmed me. Then his expression shifted, calculated concern replacing raw anger. "Mom has medical bills she can't pay," he said, voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "We wouldn't have asked, but it's serious." I looked past Lucas to my mother, who still couldn't meet my eyes. The final piece clicked into place. This dinner wasn't just about sticking me with an expensive bill. It was the prelude to a much larger financial request. "We wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious," Brittany added, her voice honey-sweet again. "Family helps family, Rachel." A couple passing by slowed their pace, pretending not to listen. I waited until they were out of earshot. "There are better ways to ask for help than manipulation," I said quietly. "If Mom has medical issues, I'd be the first to know about it." Mother finally approached, her ruby pendant catching the streetlight. "It's just some tests, honey. Nothing to worry about. Insurance covers most of it." The betrayal stung worse than Lucas's anger. Mother was in on this scheme from the beginning, using her health as a bargaining chip. I took a deep breath, weighing decades of family history against this moment. Mom, if you have medical needs, we can discuss that privately. I'm willing to help with legitimate expenses. See, Lucas burst in. She can afford. I lifted my hand, cutting him off. I wasn't talking to you. Brittany stepped forward, her voice trembling with a mix of desperation and practiced sweetness. We're all family here. Supporting family doesn't mean enabling bad behavior, I replied. Showing up tonight and discovering you plan to use me as your personal ATM isn't how family treats each other. I reached into my purse and extracted a business card, holding it out to Mother. She took it with trembling fingers. Call me tomorrow. Just you, I told her. Then I turned to Lucas and Brittany. Figure out your own bill tonight. You can't be serious, Brittany sputtered. I am. And if Mom wants to discuss her medical situation honestly, I'll consider helping, but I won't be manipulated again. I turned to leave, the weight of their stares heavy on my back. You think you're better than us now? Lucas shouted, his voice echoing across the parking lot. I paused, considering his question. Am I? With my successful business and financial independence, it would be easy to think so. But that's not it at all. I glanced over my shoulder. No, just different. And that's okay. The simple truth landed like a stone dropping into still water. Lucas's mouth opened and closed without sound. Beside him, Brittany sank onto a nearby bench, her facade completely shattered. All the energy she'd put into maintaining appearances drained away in an instant. Mother stood frozen between us, her gaze darting from me to Lucas and Brittany. I saw the silent calculation in her eyes follow her daughter or stay with her niece and nephew. The tableau we created was illuminated by headlights as a car pulled into the lot, briefly spotlighting our family drama for all to see. Rachel. Please, Mother whispered, but didn't move toward me. My number's on the card, I said, nodding once, accepting her choice without comment. As I walked to my car, I didn't look back. The sharp night air filled my lungs with each breath, and I realized I wasn't sad, I was relieved. For the first time in years, I'd spoken my truth without apology. My hand didn't shake when I unlocked my car door. The woman reflected in my window looked steady, unbroken, different, not better, and finally at peace with that distinction. Inside the safety of my car, I allowed myself one deep, shuddering breath before turning the key in the ignition. As I drove away from Belmont's, I left behind more than an unpaid dinner bill. I left behind the weight of expectations I never agreed to carry. Tomorrow, Mother might call, or she might not. Either way, I'd sleep soundly tonight. 3 months passed. I stood at the wall of windows in my office, watching the city awaken beneath me. The morning light caught on the framed photo on my desk, me at 22, exhausted but determined, sitting at that kitchen table that doubled as my first desk. I touched the frame lightly, a silent acknowledgement of how far I'd come. Rachel? Maya, my operations director, appeared in the doorway. Team's ready when you are? I followed her into our conference room, where 6 faces turned to me with something I never found at that restaurant table. Genuine respect. Let's begin, I said, and the meeting flowed with the practice rhythm of people who valued each other's contributions. No one spoke over anyone else. No one belittled ideas. We built together, brick by thoughtful brick. This was what I'd built, not just a business, but a community. Later that week, I met my mother for coffee at a small cafe near my office. She slid a cup across the table toward me, her hands steadier now than they were a month ago. We'd made these coffee meetings a monthly tradition, small steps. The bookstore hired me full-time, she said, pride creeping into her voice. Manager liked how I reorganized the history section. That's great, Mom. She hesitated, then added, I've been meaning to thank you for not giving up on me that night. The memory of Belmont's flickered between us, a ghost growing fainter with each passing day. I'm learning too, I admitted, about where to invest my energy. Last week, Mom joined us for my birthday dinner, not at some ostentatious restaurant, but in Eliza's backyard. My friend since college, Eliza had strung lights across her patio and cooked my favorite lasagna. Mom brought homemade brownies and fit seamlessly into the evening, laughing genuinely at Jordan's terrible jokes and listening to Kim's stories about our early business struggles. For the first time, I saw her without the shadow of Lucas. And Brittany, looming over her Lucas, took a job in Hartford. Mom mentioned casually as we walked through the park the following Sunday. Something in sales, smaller salary, but he seems, I don't know, lighter. I nodded, not surprised. We'd kept our distance, but through Mom, I'd heard snippets. Brittany's Instagram no longer featured designer labels and exotic locations, but home-cooked meals and local hiking trails. Their fall was hard but necessary. He asked about you, Mom added tentatively. When he's ready for an honest conversation, he knows how to reach me. I'd made peace with the timeline being out of my control. Some relationships heal, others remain broken. Both outcomes are acceptable. That evening, the aroma of garlic and rosemary filled my kitchen as friends moved around the space with comfortable familiarity. Mom arranged her homemade rolls in a basket, contributing rather than expecting. Wine's open, called Eliza, pouring generously. We gathered around my table, not the expensive mahogany Lucas would choose, but a warm cherry wood that bore. The gentle scars of dinner's past. Each mark told a story of laughter, of tears shed in safe company, of midnight brainstorming sessions. As conversations overlapped and wove together, I realized what I'd created here. Not the pale imitation of connection that lived in those strained restaurant meals, but something authentic. These people saw me not as a resource to exploit, but as a whole person, flaws and strengths alike. Later, Mom and I walked along the shoreline near my apartment, the sunset painting the water gold. When she stumbled on a rocky patch, I offered my arm without hesitation. I'm glad we found our way back to each other, she said softly. I helped her navigate the uneven ground, supporting without carrying. Family isn't who you're born to, I told her. It's who you choose to become together. The weeks passed and the seasons shifted again. My business grew, but I made sure to protect my boundaries. I learned to say no without guilt, to offer help when it was healthy, and to walk away when it wasn't. I saw my therapist regularly, working through the old wounds that still ached on rainy days. I journaled, I ran, I let myself rest. I learned that healing wasn't a destination, but a practice, a series of small, daily choices to honor my own worth. Mom flourished in her new job. She made friends at the bookstore, joined a book club, and even started taking watercolor classes at the community center. She called me sometimes just to share a funny story or ask for a recipe. Our conversations were lighter, more honest. She apologized again, not with grand gestures, but with consistency, showing up, listening, respecting my boundaries. One afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the return address was Hartford. Inside was a simple note from Lucas. I'm sorry for how I treated you. I was angry, scared, and I took it out on you. I hope you're well. Maybe someday we can talk. I sat with the letter for a long time, letting the words settle. I didn't feel anger, just a quiet acceptance. I wrote back, brief but sincere. Thank you for your apology. I wish you and Brittany peace. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Brittany, too, reached out in her own way. She sent a message. On social media, sharing a photo of her and Lucas hiking in the woods, their faces flushed and happy. "We're learning to live differently," she wrote. "It's not easy, but it's real. Thank you for standing your ground." It made us rethink everything. I realized then that boundaries, though painful in the moment, can be a gift not just to ourselves, but to those around us. By refusing to enable old patterns, I'd given my family a chance to grow, to face their own truths, to find their own way forward. As summer approached, I hosted another dinner, this time inviting both old friends and new. Mom brought her famous brownies, and Eliza made lasagna again. We ate outside under strings of lights, the air warm and full of laughter. At the end of the night, as we cleared the dishes, Mom hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you, Rachel. Not just for your success, but for your courage. For teaching me what real love looks like." I hugged her back, feeling the truth of her words settle deep in my heart. "We're both learning, Mom. That's what matters." Later, as I sat alone on the porch, watching the stars blink into existence, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the anger, the loneliness, but also the growth, the healing, the love. I realized that I was no longer defined by what I'd lost, but by what I'd chosen to build. A life on my own terms. A family by choice, not by obligation. Autumn returned, painting the city in gold and crimson. My business was thriving, but I found myself measuring success less by numbers and more by the quality of my days. I made time for morning walks, for slow breakfasts, for phone calls with friends who had become family. I learned to savor the quiet moments, the ones that used to slip by unnoticed when I was always striving, always proving. Mom and I kept our monthly coffee dates. Sometimes we talked about work, sometimes about books, sometimes about nothing at all. The silences between us were no longer heavy with things unsaid, but comfortable, like a well-worn sweater. She told me about her watercolor class, about the regulars at the bookstore, about the small joys she found in her new life. I listened, grateful for the peace that had grown between us. One afternoon, as we sat by the window of our favorite cafe, Mom reached across the table and took my hand. "I know I can never undo the hurt," she said quietly, "but I want you to know how much I admire you. Not just for your success, but for your strength. For standing up for yourself, even when it meant standing alone." I squeezed her hand, feeling the lump rise in my throat. "I learned from you, Mom. You always told me to do what's right, even when it's hard." She smiled, her eyes shining. "I just wish I'd listened to my own advice sooner." We laughed, the sound light and easy. For the first time, I felt the past loosening its grip, making room for something new. Lucas called a few weeks later. His voice was tentative, uncertain. "I'm in town for a few days. Would you like to meet for coffee?" I hesitated, memories of old wounds flickering at the edges of my mind. But I agreed, curious to see what had changed. We met at a quiet cafe. Far from the glittering restaurants of our last encounter, Lucas looked different, older, perhaps, but also softer. He apologized again, this time in person, his words halting, but sincere. "I was jealous," he admitted, and scared. "I thought if I could just keep up appearances, everything would be okay, but it wasn't. I'm sorry for how I treated you." I listened, letting his words settle. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It means a lot. I hope you're finding your own way now." He nodded, relief evident in his posture. "I am. It's not easy, but it's honest. Brittany and I are working on things. We're learning to live within our means, to appreciate what we have." We talked for a while, not as rivals or adversaries, but as two people trying to make sense of their lives. When we parted, I felt lighter, as if a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally been set down. Thanksgiving approached, and for the first time in years, I considered hosting. I invited Mom, Lucas, and Brittany, along with Eliza and a few close friends. The day was simple, no extravagant dishes, no expensive wine, just good food and honest conversation. We went around the table, sharing what we were grateful for. When it was my turn, I looked at each person, feeling the truth of my words. I'm grateful for second chances, for the courage to set boundaries, for the people who choose to show up again and again. After dinner, as we sat around the table, Lucas raised his glass. To Rachel, he said, his voice steady. For teaching us all what it means to stand up for yourself and for letting us find our way back. The toast was met with laughter and a few tears. I looked at Mom, at Lucas, at the friends who had become family, and felt a deep sense of peace. We were not perfect, not by a long shot, but we were trying. We were learning. And that was enough. As the evening wound down, Mom pulled me aside. Thank you for inviting us, she said, for giving us another chance. I hugged her, holding on a little longer than usual. Thank you for taking it. That night, as I cleaned up the kitchen, I thought about how far we'd come. The journey hadn't been easy, and there were still scars that would take time to heal. But we were moving forward, one honest conversation at a time. I stood at the window, looking out at the city lights, and felt a quiet joy settle in my chest. I had chosen my own path, set my own boundaries, and found my own peace. And in doing so, I had given my family the chance to do the same. Winter crept in quietly, dusting the city with frost and turning the nights long and still. My days were full but not frantic. I found a rhythm that felt like my own work, rest, connection, solitude. The holidays approached, and with them, the old ache of memories, both sweet and sharp. But this year, the ache was softer, tempered by the new traditions I'd built and the boundaries I'd learned to honor. Mom and I decorated my apartment together, stringing lights across the windows and baking gingerbread cookies that filled the rooms with warmth. We laughed at our lopsided snowmen and shared stories from winters past. There was no talk of expensive gifts or grand gestures, just the simple joy of being together. Present and unburdened. Lucas and Brittany sent a card, a photo of them bundled, up on a snowy trail, cheeks pink from the cold. Wishing you peace and joy, Brittany had written in her careful script. I smiled, grateful for the distance that had allowed us all to grow, and for the small steps toward reconciliation that felt honest and unforced. On Christmas Eve, I hosted a small gathering. Eliza, Jordan, Kim, and a few others who had become my chosen family. We ate, we laughed, we played board games late into the night. Mom joined us, her laughter ringing out as she won a round of charades. There was no tension, no expectation, just the easy comfort of people who cared for one another. Everyone had gone. Mom and I sat by the window, watching snow fall in the quiet street below. She sipped her tea, her hands wrapped around the mug. I used to think the holidays were about making everything perfect, she said softly. But I think it's really about being together, even if things are messy. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words. Perfection is overrated. I'd rather have real. She smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Thank you for letting me be part of your real. We sat in silence, the kind that feels full rather than empty. I thought about the years I'd spent chasing approval, trying to fit into a version of family that never quite fit me. I thought about the pain of being excluded, the sting of being used, the courage it took to say no. And I thought about the peace I'd found in choosing myself and building a life that was honest and whole. Year's Eve arrived, and with it, a sense of quiet hope. I spent the evening with friends, toasting to new beginnings and old lessons. At midnight, as fireworks lit up the sky, I made a promise to myself to keep choosing what's real, to keep honoring my boundaries, to keep loving fiercely but wisely. The months that followed were gentle. Work was steady, friendships deepened, and my relationship with Mom continued to heal. We took a weekend trip to the coast, walking along windswept beaches and collecting shells. We talked about everything and nothing, letting the rhythm of the waves carry away the last remnants of old hurts. One afternoon, as we sat on a driftwood log, Mom turned to me. "Do you ever regret how things turned out?" She asked. I thought about it for a moment, watching the tide roll in. "Sometimes I wish it hadn't been so hard," I admitted. "But I don't regret where I am now. I'm proud of what I've built, of who I've become. And I'm grateful for the chance to know you as you are now, not just as you were." She squeezed my hand, her grip strong and sure. "I'm proud of you too, Rachel, more than you'll ever know." We sat there, side by side, the sun setting in a blaze of color. I realized that forgiveness wasn't a single act, but a series of choices, a willingness to let go, to move forward, to believe in the possibility of something better. Spring returned, and with it, a sense of renewal. I planted flowers on my balcony, watched them bloom, and thought about how much I'd grown. I reached out to Lucas and Brittany, inviting them to join us for a picnic in the park. They accepted, and the afternoon was easy, filled with laughter and stories. The past wasn't forgotten, but it no longer held us captive as the sun set. And we packed up our things. Lucas pulled me aside. "Thank you for giving us another chance," he said quietly. "For not shutting the door." I smiled, feeling the weight of old wounds lift. "We're all learning, Lucas. That's what matters." That night, as I sat on my balcony, the city lights twinkling below, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had chosen my own path, set my own boundaries, and found my own joy. And in doing so, I had given my family and myself the gift of a new beginning. Summer arrived with a gentle promise, sunlight spilling through my windows and the city humming with life. I found myself waking up each morning with a sense of quiet anticipation, grateful for the routines I'd built and the freedom I claimed. My days were filled with work I loved, evenings with friends who felt like home, and weekends spent exploring new corners of the city or simply reading on my balcony. Flowers blooming all around me. Mom and I kept our tradition of Sunday walks, wandering through farmers markets and city parks, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying the silence. She told me about her latest book club pick, about the regulars at the bookstore, about the watercolor class she was now teaching to beginners. I listened, proud of the life she'd created for herself, proud of the way we'd both learned to grow beyond old patterns. Lucas and Brittany visited one weekend, bringing a homemade pie and stories of their new life. We sat on my balcony sharing food and laughter, the conversation easy and unforced. There were moments of awkwardness, small reminders of the distance we'd traveled, but they were quickly replaced by genuine connection. Brittany talked about her new job at a local nonprofit, Lucas about coaching a youth soccer team. They seemed lighter, more grounded, as if letting go of old expectations had made room for something real. One evening, after everyone had gone, I sat with Mom on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below. She looked at me, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever miss the way things used to be?" she asked. I considered the question, searching for the truth. "Sometimes I miss the idea of what I thought family should be," I said. "But I don't miss the reality of always feeling like I had to earn my place. I'd rather have this honest, imperfect, but real." She nodded, her eyes shining. "Me too." As the summer days stretched on, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here, the pain of betrayal, the courage it took to set boundaries, the slow, steady work of healing. I realized that every step, every hard conversation, every moment of doubt, every act of forgiveness had been necessary. They had shaped me, taught me what I was capable of, and shown me the power of choosing myself. I poured that understanding into my work, mentoring young women who were building their own businesses, encouraging them to trust their instincts and honor their worth. I spoke at conferences, sharing my story not as a tale of triumph over adversity, but as a testament to the strength found in vulnerability and the freedom found in authenticity. One afternoon, after a workshop, a young woman approached me. "How did you know it was time to walk away?" she asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. I smiled, remembering the night at Belmont's, the weight of the bell, the heaviness of old expectations. When staying started to cost me more than leaving, I said. When I realized that loving myself meant setting boundaries, even if it meant disappointing others. She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Thank you." I needed to hear that. As the sun set, I walked home, feeling the quiet satisfaction of having helped someone else find their own strength. I thought about the people who had supported me: Eliza, Jordan, Kim, my team at work, even Mom, and in their own way, Lucas and Brittany. I realized that family wasn't just about blood or history. It was about the people who showed up, who listened, who respected your boundaries and celebrated your growth. That night, as I sat on my balcony, the city alive with summer sounds, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the pain that had taught me resilience, for the boundaries that had given me freedom, for the love that had grown in the spaces where old wounds had finally healed. I knew there would still be hard days, moments when the past tugged at me, when old doubts resurfaced. But I also knew that I was no longer defined by those moments. I had chosen my own path, built my own family, and found my own peace. As the stars appeared overhead, I whispered a quiet thank you to the girl I had been, to the woman I had become, and to the future that was finally truly mine. The last days of summer faded into a gentle golden autumn. I found myself pausing more often on my morning walks, in the quiet of my office, in the laughter-filled evenings with friends, to simply breathe and notice how much lighter my life felt. The old ache of needing to prove myself, to earn love, had softened into something almost unrecognizable: self-acceptance. One Saturday, Mom and I sat together in a small park, watching children play beneath the turning leaves. She reached for my hand, her grip warm and steady. "I'm grateful for you, Rachel," she said. "For your forgiveness, for your strength, for teaching me that love doesn't mean losing yourself." I squeezed her hand, feeling the truth settle between us. "I'm grateful for you too, Mom, for growing with me, for choosing honesty even when it was hard." We sat in companionable silence, the kind that only comes after weathering storms together. I thought about Lucas and Brittany, about the way our family had changed, not perfect, not always close, but honest and real. I thought about Eliza and my friends, about the community I'd built from scratch, about the business that had become more than a job, a place where respect and kindness were the foundation. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the grass, I realized that the story I'd lived was not one of loss, but of reclamation. I had reclaimed my voice, my boundaries, my joy. I had learned that saying no was sometimes the bravest way to say yes to myself, to my future, to the kind of love that doesn't demand sacrifice as proof. That evening, I hosted one last dinner. On my balcony, the air crisp and sweet with the promise of change. Mom brought her homemade rolls. Lucas and Brittany arrived with laughter and stories, and my friends filled the table with warmth. We ate, we toasted, we shared memories and dreams. There was no pretense, no hidden agenda, just the simple, extraordinary gift of being together, seen and accepted for who we truly were. As the night deepened and the city lights shimmered below, I stood at the edge of the balcony, breathing in the cool air. I felt whole. I felt free. I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same courage that had brought me here, because I had learned, finally, that I was enough, that I could choose my own family, my own happiness, my own peace. And that was the ending and the beginning I had always deserved.